Hello, everybody. My name's DEDMan, and welcome to another episode of Reality of an Avid Gamer. And again, we're talking about the Callisto Protocol. So, I have played through what I think is about the halfway point. From what I can tell, as soon as you get your upgraded suit, that is roughly halfway in between the game. And, as always, I have my thoughts on it. So, first off, I do want to highly praise the graphics. The graphics are so realistic that, I know I'm playing a game, but sometimes I wonder, am I really playing a game? Now, granted, those graphics do have some flaws with it, but for the most part, they are all great. Mostly what I'm thinking of is the little crawling biophages. I don't know what they're called yet. But I have seen some bits where they just kind of looks like they phase in and out rather than going through an actual vent or anything. But beyond that, the graphics are pretty great. So a lot of what I have to say about the Callisto Protocol is nitpicky. And just to preface it, is all coming from a hardcore Dead Space fan. It is my favorite horror series of all time. And I had high expectations for Callisto Protocol because of that. Because it was helmed by Glenn Schofield, and because of all the marketing basically made it look like it's Dead Space, but not with the IP. So, a couple of nitpicks, and granted, I will grant that these were pre-first patch, because my internet's been a little on the fritz lately, so I didn't get to play it with the patch right away. Granted, this first one, not being able to play audio logs outside of the menu, that one still isn't changed. You can't pick up the audio logs and continue playing. You have to full stop and listen to the audio logs, and that kills the pacing, especially when you're trying to get the little bits of information and, figure out and piece together what's going on. And I've still encountered, the second one kind of rolls into it. There was an audio bug that made the Warden's voiceover not play no matter how many times I reset the game. That was eventually fixed by having the latest patch. But even in the most up-to-date patch, as of December 10th, I still was getting some audio not being not coming out, and those were mostly just in the logs. So like I would go to open the log and I could see the little waveform knowing that it was trying to play, but there was no sound coming out, there was no subtitles coming up. So honestly, I've just got to a point where I'm not even listening to the audio logs because I don't want to get into it and have to full stop and then them not work. So that is a little bit of a problem with the storytelling after a point, because I don't want to actively engage with the story if it's not going to present itself to me properly. Personally, I wish most games had a field of view slider if they're going to be in... if they're going to be in first person too, yes, but especially in third person, I'm not a fan of how close the camera is to Jacob. Granted, that's probably to help accent the scares, but to me, this game isn't even really all that scary, so it's not really doing its job. I think there was like once or twice that I've actually jumped, but I'm not feeling that dread that I should be feeling for being in the situation. I can definitely say the situation itself is supposed to be tense and scary, but for whatever reason, it's not hitting like it should. I was more terrified of Shadows of Rose than I am with the Callisto Protocol. And granted, that has a lot to do with psychological stuff more than the actual scares itself, but to me, this game just isn't hitting it with the scare factors. And also, the biophages aren't as scary looking as the necromorphs. You've got the standard ones, the ones that spit acid, and the explodey ones are the ones that I've come across. I think I'm missing one. Oh, and I guess they all can mutate into the tentacles. But so far, none of the designs are scaring me like they should. I'm not... I don't know what's the deal. I don't know if the expectation was too high and it's not meeting it or what. But it's just slightly disappointing so far with how everything's turned out. So I will go ahead and put another positive back on top of all this negativity. Their sound design is very spot on. It's very much moaning and groaning and guttural sounds and squelching of body parts. They've got the sound design for them nailed. And that is definitely something fantastic. And I do like the setup and the atmosphere of it. It's very much and I do apologize for having to compare it to Dead Space, because that is something that the creators have worked on prior, and it's a point of reference. But very similar to Dead Space and to Alien, the Alien franchise, the tech and the environment is very much futuristic, but also very jank at the same time. You can tell that corners are cut in the budget somewhere, and these people don't want to upgrade the stuff that they want to, so things are kind of outdated in some areas, and it is very believably lived in as far as how everything looks. I'm not sure so much if I like the progression of how I'm getting through the story. That's going to lead into my next little negative on that. There's no map or waypoint. And granted, the game is very linear, which is a bummer in and of itself, but there's no direction that you're going. You know, there's nothing that can give you... The only hint you can get is if you pull up your inventory screen, and it will tell you, oh, hey, by the way, here's this thing, and here's where you're supposed to go. But there, unfortunately, isn't. So I haven't found myself getting lost, but it is kind of annoying, because the way I played Dead Space was I would always, if I come up to like a fork in the road, I would always use my little waypoint and figure out where I'm supposed to go next, and then I could freely go and explore in the opposite direction, consequence-free, you know, knowing that I'm not going to accidentally progress the story and miss something out. That's always... Anytime somebody complains about there being waypoints and stuff, to me, the waypoint is telling you exactly where the next bit of story is, so that if you want to, you can explore elsewhere. That way, it gives you the option of making sure that you can explore to your heart's content, or if you want to just press on with the story, you can. You know, it gives you options. There's too many damn tight squeezes, also. I don't know what exactly is the reason for this, because it doesn't seem like the game is having a problem loading itself, so I don't want to be one of those people that says, oh, well, they're just doing it to disguise loading screens, because there's way too many for it to be loading screens. That, or the game just was not optimized well at all, which I hope it's not that. I mean, hell, Isaac Clarke, as an engineer, you would think he would be crawling around in vents and shit more, and he even wasn't. But there's too much vent crawling, too much tight squeezes for my liking, because that, again, kills the pace of what you're doing. And speaking of killing the pace, there's too many realistic actions. So, like, him scooping, or crouching down to scoop up something off the ground, or him putting his gun away to take out his baton. I understand why these things are the way they are, that it's meant to evoke some sense of realism, but it is also a pace killer. You know, when you're fighting for your life against these things, you know, it takes like a full second for you to holster your gun and pull out your baton. Whereas, again, in Dead Space, you just beat the shit out of them with your gun. Now, I'm not saying it needs to be that, but I don't know, maybe he needs to offhand the baton or something, and they're quicker switching. I don't know what could be done to fix the problem as it currently stands, other than to make the animations faster. But to me, it just kills the pacing too, especially if, say, you, it's not TK in here, but it's the TK module, basically. You stick them up on the spikes on the wall, and then you want to smash them to get your, whatever loot drop that it's going to give you, the biophages. So you pull out your gun, because you have to aim and use your telekinetic thing, and then once you're done with that, you use your telekinetic thing, smack them onto the tube, and then you holster your gun and pull out your baton to then smack them to get your item. And it seems to me like it's a lot of needless animations for it, especially if they're going to say, oh hey, smash up the corpses to get your items, which is fine because that's how it's always been in these kinds of games. But it feels overly long to the point of detriment. That was one of the reasons of why it's hard for me to get into something like Red Dead Redemption, because the animations are overly damn long, and it's nice for realism's sake, but for actually playing the game, it's very boring. It's very boring to be going through tight squeezes all the time. Let's see, I have one more point, and that would be about the combat. So, I originally wrote in as the combat is not to my taste. I have changed my mind a little bit on that. I actually do like the combat. It's a nice kind of, if you think of it in terms of like a rhythm game, it is a rhythm. You dodge, hit, or dodge, hit, and just pay attention to what's going on. My only big rub with the combat is it seems to be focused on one-on-one. To me, it doesn't focus as well with more than one target, because there's been plenty of times where I've tried to keep my distance and keep everything in my line of sight, but something will just come and sideswipe the shit out of me, and then I get wombo comboed into death. And it just doesn't seem like it. Weirdly enough, it seems like it wasn't balanced for multiple combatants, even though there's gonna be multiple combatants. The combat itself is fine. I don't particularly like it for this style of game, but I don't mind it on the same vein either. So it's all going to be up to personal preference. So far, I'm not disliking Callisto Protocol, but it has definitely hit that I'm kind of disappointed by it because it's not remotely what I thought what it was going to be. I honestly thought it was going to be the second coming of Dead Space, so to speak, and now I'm not so sure. I do still have the rest of the game to go through, and I haven't said anything about the story because so far the story is kind of eh. It kind of just went under I like the good it's got a good setup and it's got great atmosphere. It just, to me, doesn't do anything with either of those things. But I'm gonna keep playing it and keep going through it, and whenever I do my everything great about, I'm gonna give it its own fair shake. But so far, it's definitely, it's in that middle ground of, it's as good as I expected it to be, but it's also not as good as I wanted it to be. I definitely expected from the devs of Dead Space to have a little more to this. I expected, I'm on the one hand, I'm very happy that they are doing something that is not quite Dead Space. They did try something new, and I will always champion trying something new, even if the execution didn't go over so well. But I almost wish it was on something else. I have a lot of respect for Glenn Schofield and his team, and I'm disappointed knowing what they have done in the past and kind of knowing where we're at now. But I haven't finished the game, so I'm going to quit rambling here. I'm going to go finish playing it and then get my thoughts all together and figure out where I'm going from here. So that's going to be it for this one, and I will see everybody in the finale.